Welcome to the Backstory, a special series from Future of Faith. In each episode, we take a look behind the scenes of projects from the National Storytelling Initiative on Christian Faith and Life. We'll be pulling back the curtains on our own work, sharing the wins and the struggles, and inviting others on to do the same. We're going to learn from each other and build this community together. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Backstory podcast. As always, here with Elizabeth and Shannon. We've got all kinds of interesting updates and a new special guest for this episode, so it's gonna be really exciting.
So good. Thanks, Josh. Okay, my standard question. Any updates from your projects really quickly? Because this is a little bit of a longer interview, so I want to give it some space to breathe for folks. But yeah, maybe 1 or 2 minutes of updates from your projects.
Yeah, I'll just start. We are really investing heavily into research. Like we've chosen to focus on the dones. We know that's a very, very broad um category of people, like generationally, racially, socioeconomically, and also for where people are in their journey. There are people that are just like one step out the door, and then some that are really becoming re-enchanted, and there's everyone in between. So we are doing a big, big, big chunk of research around where people that are done, like where they can begin experiencing and having conversations again about transcendence and faith community and what lights them up. And so we have just really um I don't know, we've just really launched into that. And so when we're back in a couple weeks, I think I'll have more to say about that. But we're really in the weeds with it at the moment. So
Super exciting. Is that, Shannon, is that research, like, is it survey research or qualitative research? What are you looking at, sort of archival, like where they're going? What's the status of it right now?
we're doing really highly qualitative research. And
Hmm.
I'm not doing that. And we've invested, heavily
Yeah,
into it and have somebody running that. But so we got some data, but they're just in the midst of all of the qualitative research right now.
very cool. Well, one of the things that we have promised is in the deliverables for our grant is ultimately to create this like off the shelf version of these local storytelling events that we're going to be hosting. And the premise is that we will, over the course of the years, like take what we've learned by facilitating them ourselves and package them up in some way, TBD, that could help a congregation do it or a community do it without us. Because even though sustainability is not like the key part of this grant, we cared about it and we wanted to not lose all that knowledge. So one of the ways that we're starting to toy around with that is with a very closed system AI tool that's only internal at the moment. So that we're using it as our own knowledge bank instead of like a database that we could search through. I'm sure you all have been collecting these like articles and these like people like, I love this story for this reason. And like, here's the best way to do ethical storytelling. There's like all these, but I can't keep them all straight. And so we've been like, as we're curating them and thinking through, like, that's one we want to hold on to. For copyright issues, it clearly can't go into some publicly accessible program, but we're working on finding a way that we can just use it internally, ultimately as a like a trial run for like what could we build that could be not,
Mm.
without violating copyright and people's intellectual property. How could we build something that people could be highly contained, not sort of just like open to the wild, that they could then chat with to say like, oh yeah, I would love to do a storytelling festival, but we're like, this is the parameters of our community. What things should we be keeping in mind, and what steps should we be taking? To alleviate my fear was like we would have to build something ultimately that would be so flexible that it could fit all those different contexts, or God help me, has so many different permutations that we'd be producing, guide after guide after guide after guide after guide, and still not exhaust them all. So I'll be curious to see how it shows up. I mean, I really have no idea if it will work. I mean, it feels like an experiment in the truest sense.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
it
sounds like
though.
it's super valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and
So
that
that's what.
I think, grants should help us be able to do that, right? Experiment and
Yeah,
learn.
yeah.
And so
It's
that's,
one of the benefits of having TriTank in this partnership with VTS and Future Faith, because TriTank does experiments all the time. So even just like having the appetite for that kind of like risk and failure is not a place that a lot of nonprofits or entities have. And Lorenzo's like, sure,
Let's try.
let's give it a shot.
It's
Yeah,
great.
let's try.
That's wonderful. I love hearing about how each of y'all are progressing, and gosh, I can't wait to engage with the stuff that comes from each of your projects. Shannon, do you want to intro us into this next interview?
Yeah, so I had the privilege of being with Metropolitan AME Church, which is a legend of a church. If you don't know it, they're the church that took the Proud Boys to court and won. So there's like a whole story there, which has nothing to do with their storytelling grant. But their whole team was on. So I love it too, because they are just all in. So I was with John and Bill and Cosette and Dana. So there are lots of voices that come through, but I love it. It shows how big this team is. And so, yeah,
It's a really good one to watch on YouTube. If you're not watching these on video, this one, because there are so many voices, I found it helpful to like see the video.
great. Well, you also will see I was doing it at like 8 o'clock at night in the UK. So it's very dark. But yeah, let's listen. Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon, and today I am with the Metropolitan AME Storytelling Group out of Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C. And and we've got the whole team here. So I'm so excited. So I wonder who wants to go and just tell me a little bit about your project. When you saw the storytelling RFP come out, you said, I've got an idea. This is what we're going to do. Somebody tell me about it.
So I think I can jump in. When I heard that the endowment wanted to strengthen folks' ability to tell a story about Christianity that was, I guess, in contradistinction to the kind of white Christian nationalism, I was interested, and it was also compelling because that's just a reality that has not formed me nor shaped me in my community. Of course, culturally, it shapes the larger body politic and theological and political and economic discourse. But for us, I was rooted in a much different tradition. I think a more human tradition that values all people, that sees the sacred in all human beings. And that is, I would argue, the faith that we have received from our ancestors. I think that would be true for Cosette, for John, and for Dana. And to amplify that read of what Christian faith is, what it means for human beings, what it means for the earth, what it means for connection, to amplify that seemed not only like a duty, but a joy to acquaint people with that reality. And coming together with these really, really gifted folks, Dana, John, and Cosette, we talked about the tables that faith built, a welcome table of radical hospitality, a table for imagination and art to sustain this vision of the world and vision of faith, and a table that cares for creation, that understands that we come from the dust of the earth, that we are at one with all things that we see, and we depend upon caring for the earth. It cares for us. And so it just seemed like a really great opportunity, and I was excited about it.
That's great. Um, so Bill, when you talk about these tables, is all of your storytelling rooted around those three tables? Um, this welcome table, like this sense of hospitality, and then
Yes.
I this kind of imagination table, which I think I heard is being talked about as like church in the wild. Is that? And
Yeah,
then,
so Church in the Wild is centered in with the welcome table.
okay.
So I'm thinking about the word from which we get religion in Latin, religio, which means to bind together. Thinking
Mm,
about what faith is that which binds us to one another and binds us to the divine, to the creator. And so the welcome table seeks to find churches in the wild. That is, how do people bind themselves together in spaces that are not um, formal religious spaces? Because I think we have something to learn from them. So the evangelical impulse is to always teach and to correct and to erase. We want to find human beings doing the beautiful work of grieving together, sharing joy and success and pain wherever that exists. It exists in bars, it exists in cigar shops, it exists in music venues. We want to learn from that because human beings are always doing church, always doing religion, always binding ourselves. What can we learn from that? The imaginations table, artists, music, visual artists. What stories are they telling to teach and expand the faith? And then creations table centers on the work that Metropolitan has been doing to essentially fight uh, heat islands in Black, brown, and poor communities, fight that kind of climate apartheid, as John calls it. And we want to tell the stories of people who have always been fighting these creation battles, but they haven't been able to amplify their stories. But if they had the largesse of a Lilly Endowment or others, they could help to solve the big problems that are really afflicting us all. So, yeah, those three tables, I think, give us a wide berth for creativity and for growth and for learning, and also hopefully for intersecting with other folks who are doing the work.
No, that's amazing. So all of your stories will come out of the way you're thinking about these three tables kind of theologically and metaphorically, right?
Somebody else jump in. I've talked too much.
No, that's it, right? So the theological through line, if you will, the metaphor, the visual, is the table. In fact, the project is come to the table, and so we differentiate those three tables that Bill talked
Mm,
about, keeping to the theme because of the metaphorical power of table, the scriptural power of table.
mm.
Jesus gathered often around tables with those with whom he was in relation. But
And
then
John, I
also,
lied. I got to jump in. The thing that really solidified this for
I thought
me,
you said you talked too much, sir.
I lied, sir. I lied. Forgive me.
Well, that's
It is the song that we sang growing up, that ancestral song. We're gonna sit at the welcome table.
Mm.
And I know you know it, Shannon. Everybody has sung that somewhere. And I think what's important is the table that they built and sang about is diametrically opposed to that story of Christianity that excludes. And so that metaphor fed everything else. Sorry,
Mm.
John. Now I'm done.
no, you're not, and we all know this.
But come back, keep going. John, you pick up where you were. So you've got the
I don't know where I was. I was, but the answer to your question is yes. All of our storytelling will emerge out of those three visual and metaphorical images.
okay, fantastic. Now, I know you got your grant at the beginning of this year, so January or late December 2025, January 2026. So we're just a couple of months in. But have you already been doing have you been trying to get these stories? Have you been experimenting at all with stories? Or are you still in the planning phase? And there's no judgment because everyone's all over the map in this.
Yeah, we're still very much in the planning phase.
Okay.
This is
But
one of the things we're learning, or I don't know if learning, experiencing, learning is how difficult it is to tell the kind of stories you want to tell in ways that are generative and additive and not extractive.
yeah.
So people who tell stories often go into places with an agenda, with an angle, with a perspective, with some goals and objectives that they want to accomplish. They
Mm,
tell those stories, and in the communities, the people, the institutions that they leave in their wake are no better for those folks having gone in. And in fact, some cases they are even worse off than when the folks went in to tell the story. So what we want to do in addition to disrupting not only the kinds of stories that are being told and the prevailing narrative that Lily is also trying to combat, but also in the ways that stories are told
yeah. So
and how we engage with communities as we're telling these stories.
So I would love to hear a little more about that. So what are you learning? Is it changed how you're thinking about even who tells the story? Yeah, can you just talk about, are there values that are coming more and more to the surface? I mean, obviously, like I think you're spot on. Like we all know this, right? A lot of stories and people think they're doing good by coming in and telling the story, but actually it does as much harm as good.
Yeah.
Well, can be anyway. So yeah, talk about that a little more.
Well, so I think that's why we're spending so much time planning. In fact, we sort of said to Lily that we were going to take the first half of this year and really plan and develop those ethical storytelling protocols to develop sort of rules of engagement for how we go into places. Bill mentioned some of the types of places we envision engaging, bars, restaurants, beauty salons. So what does it mean to go into these places, not in a transactional posture, not in an extractive posture, but in a posture where both parties sort of can mutually benefit, where the folks that we are wanting to tell the story about have some input into how the story is told,
Mm.
right, as opposed to the ways that this is typically done. So we're learning how difficult that is,
How?
and how much time
How
it takes to do it well.
how are you learning that? Is there someone helping you? Are you doing some listening groups? Yeah, how's
So a lot of it is data driven. Dana and Terry Adams are working on sort of the research piece that is going to undergird a lot of what we're doing. But we're so early in the planning phase. Um, we are going to conduct some listening groups. And Dana, please feel free to jump in. I don't know what happened to Cosette. Um, we are doing listening sessions. We're doing focus groups, or we have not started yet, but we're developing even the questions, right? The questions that will guide our conversation in those groups. Think giving a lot of thought on the front end and intentionality around making sure that we're not only asking the kinds of questions that will get us the information we want, but will then also contribute to the larger goals of ethical, additive, generative storytelling.
no, I love
So another thing to mention, I mean, because the beautiful thing is the endowment has allowed us to staff. So each
uh,
table is working independently, but we come together to talk about where we are. With our table, we are in the early phases of storyboarding. So we are talking about, we, John is right. So of course we haven't gone out to engage but we're thinking through. So we want to, right now the thinking is to follow some people in these spaces, to learn about them, to have depth of character development and growth and trajectory as these things are filmed. And it's really good that we have the resources to get the people to do this well. And
mm,
so we're thinking about who are the people whose stories we need to tell. So we're thinking it needs to be diverse. So people who are uh, kind of church separated to church divorced, uh, people who hold on to some Christian vocabulary, but who are dabbling in African traditional religions, dabbling in other spiritual technologies. And I think that Christianity too is a spiritual technology. So that's not to say that these things are different. So uh, are there queer people in the space? And of course, there are queer people in the conversation helping us to drive that. We talked last night about what it would mean. This is the beautiful thing when we get together, the way that these things intersect. So Omar, who's on the team, mentioned two young ladies, twins, and you may know these people. They are visual artists, and they talk often about faith and what it might mean to include those people, and then to bring into these. We want to live in conversations because here's one of the problems, and I don't think it's just us. Like people who are in, many of them think that they are better than or more loved by God than those who are outside. And that really isn't a way to expand any kind of conversation. So and we want to, Willie Jennings said something very important in his, he'd been saying it for a while, but he said it after whiteness. that one of the challenges is if you are always teacher and never student,
Mm.
then your intention ultimately is exploitation, oppression, extraction. So part of the protocol is we're not going to teach you, we're going to learn and be in dialogue, and it may emerge from our being together as equals, but I'm not like dropping stuff on you. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I really love the learning posture. You're going really slow. I think like that's the value of a grant, right? Like the grant can allow you the time to build well and to listen and to pivot. Dana, I just want to, because John mentioned tagged to you earlier. I'm wondering what you're thinking, or if you'd like to jump in and add to what Bill and John have said.
Sure. I think especially on that last point that you made, the beauty of having the grant to be able to do it is also to figure out something that we're all coming to see is more difficult than we imagined too, the distribution component of it. So we do this like really incredible work. We have all of the research behind it. We have wonderful assets that we are trying to share, but where do they live? How do we store them? How do we make sure that they're in front of people? How do we gauge people's reaction before they are in the space, and their reaction after? So where do we see the growth trajectory, and how do we do that too without being exploited? Completely aware of all of the things that are best practices in terms of like an institutional review. So we are behaving as researchers as though we are responsible, like following the codes of responsible conduct for research, even though we don't necessarily have to. But how do we ensure that we can show that there has been movement? Because the project really is research based. It really started a lot out of what are the religious nuns and duns thinking and doing, and what matters to them. People who have no religious affiliation, people who had religious affiliation but say that they are done with religious affiliations, really blurring those lines between spiritual, religious, traditional, denominational, and so on. So we're really trying to take advantage of the research that we have available to us and the team to then begin to breathe life into things that we know anecdotally are true, but we want to have some empirical evidence for as well.
No, that's fantastic. I feel like we should have an offline conversation about the research around the nuns and duns just for the project I'm involved in. But I'm going to stick to this and ask you to double down on distribution. What are you thinking about distribution? How much does it feel like this is a real growing edge for you and the team? Because obviously, I mean, like storytelling is something you know a lot about, and you've seen where it's been done wrong and you see where it's been done right, and you have this opportunity to do something different in your community. But distribution, yeah, where are you with that?
It is a growing edge indeed. And it's something that we're also excited about because we also have a very curious team and a team that really likes each other. So we have a lot of fun, but we also bring all of our experiences into the space as well. So we understand what it means to be a professional at a thing. Like neither John nor Bill would turn loose a person who is theologically untrained and pretend that they are theologically trained. Like they may have a lay person to preach, for instance, but we understand training. So similarly, me as a researcher, I'm saying we can't just like make decisions without thinking about what's behind it. For us, it is the question that we're asking now in these planning phases is, do we want to stick with our idea, giving ourselves a little bit of flexibility to change if we need to? And that's across all three tables. Or are we clear and definitive about what we want to do? And then we're going to try to match that to the best distribution platforms. So I think we have begun to ask questions, and our project manager is like wonderful in terms of, or I'm not exactly sure what Michelle's role is. It might be project manager. It may be like the person who herds cats, like whatever that's called, right? The cat herder asks us all the time, like, what constitutes success for us in this project? What are the things that we cannot compromise? What are the values that undergird across all three tables? So the distribution question is like informed by that as well. Would we be willing to sell the intellectual property to a Netflix, or are we saying we want to own and control the way that it's distributed? And that's more important to us than having it streamed by 1 million people.
What does success look like for you at the end of 5 years and $5 million?
that we are absolutely clear about how we can improve the ways religious duns can feel welcome
Mm-mm.
in all of the spaces that they find themselves in. So, and that has like all of the tentacles that you can imagine. So it also ensures success looks like people who are in the traditional space understand why duns are done, and then like will have some agility around receiving them and considering belonging as this real thing. It means that we understand duns and can pivot. It means that we educate duns. All of those things I think are a part of that. Like so much of what we do like out of necessity, out of this is just who we are. And a
Mm.
big part of what we want to be able to do with the storytelling part and success also to us looks like we told this story with integrity, we told this story well, and we have reached people with this story, and we can see the transformation from one point to the other.
That's great. Okay, so let's talk about Duns for a minute. So Duns is a huge like there are a lot of types of Duns, right? And nuns, and of every demographic, socioeconomic, racial, north and south. Can we talk about what Dun do you have? Is it more specific in your mind?
Yeah, and
Yeah. Go
we
ahead.
can everybody can weigh in. We're talking especially about African American Gen Z duns.
Okay. That's
And like, of course, like we argue about like how fluid that Gen Z is, like who's on the edge, who's on the other edge. But even within African American duns, you also, as Bill alluded to, you have queers, you have gender fluid, you have adoptive, um, people who have adopted and made syncretic faith traditions. So the whole range.
okay.
Don, you're about to say?
No, that's it. It's and I would also say maybe the younger end of millennials too. So, but the primary is Black Gen Z, young millennials.
And all across America, or specifically in DC, or
All across. I mean, there's a certain element of geographical specificity in each table, but that's fluid. So we envision welcome table being local, imaginations table regional, creations table national.
okay.
But that there's that even within that there's some fluidity.
Okay. No, that's fantastic. Okay, I have another question, because you're the first group that we've talked to that's doing this project out of a church. You're actually a local congregation. And there's a minority if you look at the whole swath of who got the grant. Now, obviously, Metropolitan AME is not a church like any other church. But you're doing this out of your church. What do you think, or what do you hope the impact will be for Metropolitan AME doing this storytelling?
My goal is that it becomes a big welcome mat for these curious people to try our brand of congregational life. That's one. Another is I don't see this as proselytization. I would love for people to come, but I would also like for those who are experimenting, who are not in the church, to know that there are Christians who do not judge them, and who find their way of binding to one another and to creator and creation to be valid and beautiful. I think in a place like DC, what I learned is, I mean, it's cosmopolitan. The world is here, so the way that we do faith is by being in community and conversation with others, with those against whom we brush in working, eating, living. And I think another thing is there's so many congregations. I don't know, Tanner, you would know more about where Lily is trying to do what the landing is for them. I think often when
About
these
that, but
yeah, well, okay, well,
Yeah.
often when the largesse goes to persons removed from the ground, you could miss the people
Mm,
if not for the best kind of planning and resources. So I do go around the barn to say this. I would also like for this to encourage other local congregations and people who are in faith circles to be experimental,
Mm.
to open their imagination to see the holy at play wherever humans gather, the holy at play when music and art, when those things are being created, and the holy at play in the world, in nature, in all of those kinds of things. Like if people can expand their vision of where the divine exists and is at work, I think we stand a better chance of being more human in
Uh,
community.
oh, may it be so. I agree 100%. Yeah. Okay, I have a few more questions.
But Chen,
So,
I do want to say this, like I talk all that up in the sky stuff, but John and Dana can help us if you needed an answer that was more tethered to the soil. So if you needed that,
no,
please let us know. Oh, okay.
I I went with you. I loved it. I think it's worth asking though. Like obviously this is a huge piece of work that you're doing out of your church and it's gonna have an impact. Like you know. So, but I love it. It does make me think if you're hoping that there will be a long tail to influence other congregations, how that might even be part of your distribution or listening or testing. It feels like long term there might be some training that comes out of this for other congregations.
And Shannon, I will say this: it has to be said. Congregations are afraid, like
Mm,
literally. And John, today I want y'all to push back, but I use the word conjure on Sunday, and I have people come to me saying, "Wow, I didn't think you could say that in the church." Like people are the stuff that we're doing, people are afraid to try it, and I mean, again, I am. All of us are bound by our theologies in ways,
yeah.
but I just think keeping it small is going to keep it small,
Yeah.
and people have to do it in ways that resonate with who they are. But I'm really thankful to be in a space where we can play at this level.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Okay. What have you hit something that you're like, man, who do we know or we wish we could learn X? Is there like something that's like, we need to figure this part out and we keep wrestling with it? Like if you've got a community of people that are going to hear this conversation and that are also working on storytelling, is there a need or a resource that you're lacking at the moment? You thought once we have this, we could, and you might not because you're in the early days and you're planning, but I think it's worth asking.
Yeah, I would say it's the distribution piece. And not just distribution of episodes, for instance, but how do we make sure we are getting the word out about what we're trying to do with each of the tables, because we see ourselves also as bringing people together.
Mm,
So I'm thinking especially about the climate work that we're working on, where the notion was Gen Z, African American young folks especially said that they are likely to be more inclined to be engaged if there is some climate justice emphasis, like in spiritual practice. So we know that it's happening everywhere. Black
mm,
churches everywhere are doing this work. How do you amplify? So maybe distribution and amplification. And if someone has the secret sauce to amplification who also happens to have a grant, like let's talk.
yeah. Okay. That's good to know. Okay. Great. Okay. I'm gonna move to a close here, but John, I want to pick on you for a minute. Um, you said in Dallas, you stood at a white paper and you talked about all the money going into different media, news channel, kind of fueling the flame of the counter narrative story, right? Um, to Christian nationalism. And then you talked about like even if we took all of our grant money together, it's a drop in the bucket. I'd love you to talk about that argument. And then for a minute. I want you to do it in your words, not mine, and then I want to ask you a question about it.
So what I said in Dallas is true, that 60 some odd organizations through this Christian Storytelling Initiative received around $5 million. I don't think everybody got 5 million, but for simple math purposes, that's $300 million that Lily is devoting to trying to counteract white Christian nationalist narratives, religious fundamentalist narratives, narratives of the church being in decline, narratives of the church losing relevance and influence, right? I don't know if maybe right after the pandemic, the network known as Fox News settled a defamation suit for $787 million. So more than twice what Lily is devoting to this initiative. And that's their defamation lawsuit settlement bucket of money.
Mm.
And so I shared that statistic just to help us to think about the level of scale that we're up against. And that's just one network, right? We can talk about Alex Jones's $1 billion judgment for what the vitriol he spewed against the Parkland shooting victims and their families. So I shared that simply as a way to frame the level that we're playing against. It is a drop in a bucket, but someone there was a Nicholas Kristof, writer for the New York Times, who talks about it might seem like a drop in the bucket, but that's how buckets get filled, one drop at a time.
I think I mean, I kind of wanted to tee all that up to say, does this feel like a David and Goliath moment to you?
Yeah, but I mean, for those of us who have told the old story, for me in my case, I've been preaching the gospel 25 years this year. Bill longer than that. We tell stories every week, right? So some ways this is like Lily giving us money to do what we already do anyway. Which for that we give God praise. But I say that to say those of us who've been telling the old story for as long as we've been doing it, think God does God's best work in those scenarios. Jesus faced an entire empire.
And David wins.
And
David does win.
I would add too that it's also very clear that part of what the initiative is trying to do is to push back against a white nationalist co-optation of Christianity.
Yeah.
So the very deliberate attempt to say, no, we will push back and we are going to teach people how to tell stories that stick. And I say teach in quotation marks because we know, as John has already said, like we do it all day, every day. But we are going to be intentional about making this practice as deliberate, informed as possible. So that alone, the fact that you understand what you're up against and you are dedicating resources to combat that in places that it's already happening, but now you get to focus on it and to amplify it and not to do it in crisis, under duress, under resourced. It's not as much of a resource as what we're up against, but we've been doing it well with no resources. Imagine what's possible with resources.
No, I love it. I just think, I think if there's any church that can talk about this David and Goliath moment, it's you guys, because of your history. And so I just thought it was worth bringing up. And no, I think you're right. I think God shows up that, like, we follow in a tradition where, we're used to being the underdog, right? But Jesus wins, right? And David wins, and the kingdoms, things get overturned. And so this is the moment, and people are ready to hear the story fresh, I think. And I agree with what Bill said earlier, right? Like, if we just have eyes to see differently too, like that, where love's at work in places that we're we're not even looking. If it helps us look in different directions, that's going to be good too.
So Shannon, last 2 nights ago, John Cosette we had a quarterly meeting at the church. We went to a bar and taco place that one of the new members of the church owns, because he gave us $10 off. We went, but but as we were leaving, I turned to John and to Cosette. I said, "I wish church was more like a bar,
Yeah.
like more like what we experienced that night." It was, we were exchanging with people around us, like, but we're like, why does that happen here? And I keep going back to this scholarship I just heard Diana Butler Bass talk about, some New Testament scholarship, where folks are arguing that what Jesus really founded he founded subversive supper clubs. And
Mm,
and that what people absolutely hated and were trying to kill him. Now, how many times you read this man eats with sinners and tax collectors?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
this man has expanded the religio. He's expanded those to whom we are bound, to the people that we build our lives saying we're better than them because they don't wash their hands and they don't go to temple at the right time and they don't do this and they don't do that. And I keep pushing back against people saying, if you read the text, I think this is where dogma and theology mess us up. And if we just allow the story to read us and to play, when Jesus encountered people of different faiths, he didn't tell them, stop believing what you believe in. You got to believe what I believe. He said, look, your people worship on this mountain, mine worship on this mountain, but the day will come when those who worship in spirit and truth. He didn't say, leave your stuff and do my stuff." He said, let's live this new way together and God will be at work differently. So I just think that we, in a way to hold things tightly, we hold so tightly, I think that we choke off what is
Mm.
possible for spirit to do. And I just think that now, I wasn't this way at 18, but at 51, like, open hands seem to be a better formula than clenched tight
Uh,
fists.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I love that. I'm gonna use that subversive supper clubs. Jesus founded subvert. I think it's right. Like, right? They ate together, which is why I love your welcome table. Look, you guys, I'm really excited to see. I can see like so many partnerships are going to form in different ways. You're going to experiment. We want to learn as you learn and as you have needs. Um, and I'm really curious about some of these economies of scale, like even around research and distribution. So, yeah, we should stay in touch. Okay, so you guys, I could have talked to them forever, which is probably why I let it go on and on and on. But yeah, what did you think?
Oh, I was so grateful to hear from each of their perspectives. So I know it was longer than our normal interviews, but to me it didn't feel that way. I at
Yeah.
all. I could have also kept listening to them
Fill
talk
them heart,
about.
you know.
Yeah, well, the origin story, the how things were formed, how it informed their entire methodology and their concept as a whole. I mean, super inspiring and super exciting, and I cannot wait to see what comes from the tables. So,
Uh,
what about you, Josh?
It hit me in a particular place because I think one of the things that I'm always looking for are people, like organizations that represent the church that we would all like to become, and they so feel like that. I mean, just interpersonally, the dynamic, the respect they had for each other, like recognizing when voices are being let out, like left out, and so like calling on them and stepping back intentionally, and then like being so excited that they couldn't help but jump back in, and then calling each other out on it as friends, and like I loved the whole dynamic of relationship. I mean, in not like insignificant ways, it reminds me of when I feel like we're at our best at Future of Faith. That's the same kind of vibe that I get, inside of our own organization. So I love that, and so often, if the work we're doing is important, Megan Bissell and I say this a lot. Like, we take the work seriously. We don't always take ourselves seriously, and I think some of that like relational levity is so needed in this work where it so often feels hard all the time. It was
yeah.
just a joy to get to listen to them.
Yeah, I agree. There's that old quote, isn't there? We can get everything right, but if we get relationships wrong, we get everything wrong, right?
Mhm.
And so you're seeing the opposite of that. I love it. They're being so clear about their audience again. So I think, you know, I loved hearing that. And I'm really intrigued about their work on climate, which I don't think I'd realized when I first heard them talk about this project when we were all together in Dallas. But I feel really intrigued. Like, I think that a lot's going to come from that.
And you
I'm,
press them. I thought that was such a helpful question, Shannon. When you press them on audience, like historically, I think in the sort of Lily world, to name the Duns would have been enough to check the box to say, oh, they know who their audience is. It feels like in the last few calls, they've been trying to get us to be much more clear, even within those subgroups, about exactly who we're targeting. And you asked them, what do you mean by Duns? And they had like this immediate response that was like so targeted and so clear, which must make their work that much easier. Because I've done work before where I thought I knew the audience, and then it really it was just so fuzzy that it made everything we did was so hard.
Well, and that their audience informed that climate should be the focus. I feel like
Right.
there are some other projects that have a couple others, I believe, that have climate as a focus, but they are more climate focused organizations to begin with. So for a church to be focusing on that, that I think I had a big question mark to that, but when they were quick to say, oh no, when we listened and surveyed our audience and took their voice seriously, they said this is what would bring us to the table. They're like, okay, well done. That's the we're making an entire segment of our initiative about what you've said is important to you. I mean,
yeah,
that's golden.
it's good. It's such good leadership, right? Like, I mean, this is Josh to everything you're doing. Like, leadership is learning, right? And learning and listening, right?
Okay,
Well,
wait.
and doesn't it feel like exactly the right approach for this audience of like, if
Mm.
the Duns are the ones that you're trying to reach? I mean, I've been obviously a lot of these conversations over the years where essentially the question I'm getting in some, consultant or, the Q&A after talk is like, how do we get the Duns to come back? And
Mm.
which I think is just fundamentally the wrong question. And AME is really modeling the right question, which is like, how do we get to the Duns?
Yeah.
And, they said like,
And
And
what will bring you to
where,
the table.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. What would get you to the table, or like how can we get to your table? And then they took it seriously and they're going to do it. And I just like so much integrity. I love that.
Yeah, agreed.
I
Elizabeth?
think that it's not just the right question, it's the right posture.
Mhm.
And they said this too, that or John was talking about, quoting Willie J. Jennings of what is the differentiation of student and teacher.
Mhm.
And so grateful that they brought that into the space, not just because it hasn't just informed their audience, how they've listened to their audience. It's now informing the way they're working in general, that they're, and I could, again, like I have talked about this in previous episodes, and I will harp on this the rest of my life, is like, what is the ethic, right?
Yeah.
They're learning right now is how do they lift up stories in a way that's additive and not extractive and supportive. Other grantees are asking that same question right now. Some of them are asking that question, which I think is a really great beginning. And some of them have built into their implementation grant a plan for how they're going to do that. And I'm inspired by everyone along that spectrum as they're trying to figure those things out. Just want to name like how some groups are discerning their expression of that is, I think that uh, I, whether it's extended listening sessions, which I have never regretted taking more time to listen to the very people who are lifting up their stories. So groups that are choosing that, groups who are choosing to not just compensate the producers of stories, but the storytellers themselves and the voices, recognizing it costs to be honest
Yeah.
in this world today.
Mm.
And I'm not just saying that the transaction between their honesty and receiving their honesty should be money every time, but this group has decided that that is what their community they're working with needs in this time. And I think and they're able to use some of their grant to support that in that way. And I really commend everyone for taking the big steps in the long journey to figure out what does it mean to be ethical in this moment,
Mm.
and with this initiative.
Yeah, I think you're right. Do you know, the other thing I really loved, as much as they felt like they were clear, even, and had, they're doing the listening, they know where they're heading. Are also going, we really have no idea about distribution. That feels like a challenge and a pain,
Mhm.
right? And more people are saying that. which does make me wonder, like, what's it look like for us all to actually come together around that issue. And I think, what do we really mean by distribution? How, distribution to what end? This is really about, it's an impact question. I think
Mhm.
more than a distribution question. Distribution is a route to impact. So,
It's a good,
Well,
such
and I think that there are a lot of places that could use that same, like, we could benefit from that same approach, which is uh, people are really bad actually at telling you what they will do in the future. So you can ask them on surveys like, how, who will you vote for, or what kind of media will you consume, you know it and they're not lying to you in that moment. They genuinely believe what they're telling you, but they don't then act always consistently with what they said, because circumstances change, their mind changes. We're not actually very good at humans at predicting how we will feel at some indeterminate point in the future. That being said, getting some sense of like where, and honoring, like, where would you like to see your story show up, like who are the people that you would like for this to be in front of, is one of those ways that you talked about non-monetary compensation, Elizabeth, like that. I'm not suggesting that we do that instead of money, but in addition to, thinking through compensation of all the angles of, how do we honor that person's story? And one of the ways that we might be able to do that is by making sure that it gets in the hands of the people that they would like to hear it.
yeah. That goes
That's so
back to the very first podcast, right? The question: if somebody were writing a story about you and your faith, you
Yeah.
know, what would you want them to say? It's like, if somebody were going to see your story, who do you want to
Who do
see
you
it?
want to be that? Yeah. Who do you want to see it? Yeah.
See it. I do think there's still, the question for me is, but once it's seen, then what?
yeah.
Sure.
Which is like, I think we could get a whole bunch of things distributed, but to what end?
Shannon. Okay. So you mentioned this before though, Shannon. So talk through, like, at what point for you is that like, well, look, we do what we can do and we trust the Holy Spirit to do the rest, or like there is a moment at which, like, we can't plan this out in the impact side to the nth degree. Like, we do just sort of have to take on faith that we started, we're affirmed along the way, and so we just trust that this is God's work.
Okay. Absolutely. I think even with really great planning, it, you can only do what you can do. And we're really partnering with God to do this one, right? Like, we have to trust
Mm.
the Holy Spirit. But I do think we need to be clearer about intent, right?
Mm.
So, do we want people, like individuals, to be transformed, that actually, in seeing something, that they are open to God in a new way, or they have empathy for somebody in a new way, or it changes their behavior in some way? There's all kinds of impact there, and then writ large, the culmination of all these stories. Do we want people to see the church in a different light? Do they want to see faith communities are a place that they belong, that they can belong? We want to see that actually faith communities, there's a much broader spectrum of faith communities than the church on the corner, right? And I just think if we would get clearer about that, I think our design and our storytelling would be better. That's my
And I couldn't agree more. And I feel like being open to if even the evaluation or the learnings or along this to change and for your mind to be changed. I feel like having led a narrative change project, we went out saying, like, this is the thing we're measuring. This is what success, like, at the end looks like. And that is still true. But the amount of time it took for that outcome to take place, it was like there are actually indicators along the way when we've been able to say, oh, yeah, that's the thing we're doing. And when we took and having the space and grateful for an institution that was open to iteration and change, it's like, oh, the indicator for this is that, and for us, this was the work we were doing for bridge building. The indicator for this taking place was that people expressed curiosity and empathy. Curiosity for something
Yeah.
they didn't understand, and empathy for somebody who was different than them. It's like, oh, it took us kind of years to get to that place to recognize those are the things we're actually needing. It's not the only good that's coming from this, but those are the two things that we can measure if we've helped catalyze in some way.
yeah.
And we found ways to do that. I think, like, I'm excited about, I think that we don't have to be intimidated by the evaluation of the stuff that's hard to hold on to, like forgiveness or love or, all of that. But being open to that, like we can start somewhere, change our mind, shift, learn from our audience. But if we're not being creative with the questions we're asking and open to that change along the way, or just being scared by it, I think like it will keep people from being creative.
Yeah.
I
We
think
can measure so much more than what most people think. And part of the like me coming to that as a researcher was a realization that it's like the things that we think we can measure so well, like religiosity, we actually aren't doing all that great of a job with. Like it's like a lowering of the ceiling and a raising of the floor for me to help me like it helped me to expand my imagination about, yeah, we could actually measure generosity, forgiveness, trust, grace, like beyond just a survey question or on a Likert scale. And it's you're right, Elizabeth. Like we can't, as long as we know what we're after, then we can begin to construct some very unique and novel, but still rigorous ways of getting at that. Shannon, the other thing that the intent does for me though is that it helps to clarify my prayer life. You brought this up and it just like it was such a stark like immediacy for me. Like, oh, that's right. If I know what I'm intending, then I know what I'm asking for. Like, not even not like I don't mean to give the sense that my prayer life is like a list of requests, but like I know where the energy is directed toward. And sometimes you don't, and that's okay too. I mean, there's lots of prayer life for me and others that is just meditative and silent, but sometimes it is like very directed, and the intent then helps to form like specify or give some form to that water a
yeah.
little bit. So thank you for that. That was super useful.
No, yeah,
I'm going to make a pivot once you make this
no,
this
you
last
go,
statement.
you go.
Okay, because before we land the plane here, I do want to go to the way you ended the interview with them with John and kind of talking about this drop in the bucket. I feel like
Yeah.
and what does it mean to be part of this much larger ecosystem of media, which we've touched on in past episodes before. But yeah, would love to hear y'all any of your thoughts on that as well. And I think the hopeful place inside of that, as well as the reality check of where we're at. I would love to hear from both of you a little bit on how you're processing that.
Maybe I should just start with, I wasn't sure if I should ask it, but had been so struck by when John had said something similar when we were together in Dallas. And I thought I wanted it on camera and I wanted to talk about how they think about this as, just a drop in the bucket. Is it a David and Goliath moment? I mean, because I think before he'd said that in Dallas, it's like we're all sitting here going, this is the biggest project budget that I've ever,
Yes.
right? All of
Yep.
it. Even Wesleyan Impact Partners, which is a huge organization and incredible partner. But like, this is the biggest bucket of money to work on a project. So you sit from that place. But what we're trying to do is, I don't even know how to describe it, right? Like we want it to be transformative to the nth degree, right? And there is a whole landscape that's not our landscape, right? Anyway, I don't know. I'm probably muddying the waters, but I was glad I hope y'all appreciated me asking it because I think it's a good question to have on the table.
Well, I think it's a good reality check for us of remembering what this grant invites us into. That it invites us into a world for many organizations that have received money who have never been real contenders in this space, in a media space or in whatever space they're getting it. A lot of them are stepping into this for the very first time, and it's super exciting to be doing that. And also, I think it's a good reminder that a lot of the people who have been there for a long time, who are already there, who will be, um, scoping them out when they enter the space, have many, many more financial resources, much more lived experience than some of these organizations do. And I think that it was great to hear John's perspective on that. I mean, to me, it was so realistic, but also so hopeful. It felt like this is our
David
time.
wins.
David
Yeah,
wins. David wins.
exactly.
That's right.
Well, and I think without, I don't, without anybody saying anything that they shouldn't, that is still confidential. We know that that pool is not, this is not the extent of that pool. These 60 grants are not the end of the storytelling ecosystem. There's going to be more, but still, John's point is overall, even if it doubled, it would still, his point would still remain, which is, it pales in comparison to some of the other efforts out there. But I mean, if we think through the things that have really impacted American culture over the last 10, 15 years, I mean, a lot of this comes from politics, but not only from politics on both sides of the aisle. These are not well-funded initiatives to start.
Mm.
They started as small and grassroots. And so when I think about what this money does and why I'm hopeful for the collective impact of it, is because so many of us are then seeding it into smaller and smaller and smaller organizations. And it's not just what this money does for them in the production of the story that they're going to tell, it's the capacity that it builds for them to tell stories. I mean, when the 5 years is over, Future Faith is still going to know a whole lot about how to tell stories. And that is going to extend far beyond, hopefully, I mean, assuming the organization lives past the grant, like that impact will live into everything else that we do. We'll become a better storytelling organization because of the grant.
Yeah.
It's not like we're just making whatever it is that we're doing for the outputs for this initiative.
I also think it's an interesting time to be entering into this field, these organizations for the first time entering into this field in the age of AI, when I think this field is questioning, like, what does it mean? What does our future look like?
Mm-mm.
What does storytelling look like?
That's right.
What do digital platforms mean and do? I'm not making a commentary on good, bad, whatever. I'm just saying it's an interesting time to have some resources to experiment, when I think the tectonic plates of this sector are shifting and begging
Yeah.
even some of the longest tenured folks in the industry to wonder what's next. So
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if did you see this, Elizabeth, the story in the New York Times just yesterday or last week or something, saying that somebody's book got pulled, a book contract got pulled because the language got flagged as AI generated by the early readers, like by the audience, not by the editors. But the takeaway for me was that what has become clear, the publishers were saying what has become clear on the book front is not that audiences are averse to AI generated content, which is its own thing, I guess, but that they want to know when it's AI generated. And the way I mean, even a year ago, if you would have asked that question, I think everybody would have said, no AI generated content at all, ever. And now they're just like, okay, we'll flag it. To your point, like these tectonic plates are shifting at a very rapid pace. The media landscape is moving so quickly that it's gonna while the 5 years of these grants are going on, it's gonna move.
But I think going back to your point, right, that things that have changed and shaped history, industries, markets come from the margins, not from the mainstream. And Jesus always went to the margin, right? And, we follow a gospel that is, the loaves and the fishes and David and Goliath. And I love that, so let's we're with this, like God is with us in this work. So we don't have any idea what's really going to come. So I think, again, going back to this, we weigh intent and impact with faith and humility and discipline, discipleship, I think.
no, I feel like, yeah, and in this, as much uncertainty as is in front of us, I am grateful to be in community with each of you and all the folks who are listening, who are doing this good storytelling work. And so for all those reasons and many others, thanks for taking a listen. And I hope you stick with us as we continue following these projects. Grateful for you.
You've been listening to the Backstory podcast. For all the episodes and more resources, head over to www.futureoffaith.org/storytelling.